All right. Welcome, everybody, to the August live stream, the first August live stream. And if you haven't already, you can go to the link at the top of the chat and download the PDF for this month's material. There is a main 12-bar tune called Rosedale Shuffle, and then there are 9 variations. So I'm going to pull up the PDF now and just kind of we'll walk through some of that material and take some questions, and also just talk a little bit about some exercises at the very beginning of the handout that will help you with some of the basic some of the basic picking hand coordination. So let me know if there's any issues with the sound, and feel free to just post questions in the chat as we go. I will get to them whenever I can in the course of the stream. Okay, so let me see here. That's not it. That's it. Okay. Doink, doink. There we go. Okay. So actually, we're not going to look at this quite yet. We're going to start with the tune. So the idea is, over the course of these 9 variations, this will show you some of the ways to take a basic blues melody with a basic steady bass and slowly build it out with all of the different nuances and inflections that make it sound more musical. If you haven't watched the introductory video yet on the intro and PDF page, I encourage you to do so, because it's a short layout of how the material is organized and why we're doing it this way this month. This is a change up from the usual fundamental, embellished, and vamp presentation, which is then followed by improvisation and arranging live streams. In this case, we're just going to spend the month working on this one tune in 3 stages of development. And the first week's material, for which I've made the short videos that are posted, is about the equivalent to the amount of material that you would usually get in the first week with the fundamental version of the tune, and then the embellished version of the tune, and then a vamp you can play. So if you are used to working on the fundamental for the month, or if you are new and you're at a point where you simply want to learn a new tune, just a 12-bar tune to play, then this first week's material will be enough to work on for the whole month. If you are one of those people who are moving through the embellished tune within the first week or 2, going on to work on the improvisation and the arranging material after that, and then posting a complete version of the tune within the next month or 2, then you'll want to go through all 9 variations. But the first week, we're going to basically work on the transition from just a steady bass to a steady bass that's rocking between the root and the 5th on the 1 chord, and then having some little walk-ups to the D7 chord and some different moves for the E chord, basically creating more variations and more variety in the bass. And then we'll sort of conclude this first week with having some offbeats that help keep the groove going when the melody is not active, so that you can basically go from playing just the melody over the bass to playing a melody over a bass that is adding variety and commentary in between the melody moments, and also having some offbeats with the picking fingers to keep the groove going and have something going on in the spaces between the melodies. So that's what we're really going to cover this first week. In the second week, we'll get into some variations that sort of contribute to the overall development of the tune and make it feel more like an arrangement. Like we'll do some stop time, we'll extend the 1 chord. And then in the third week, we'll focus on some technique things that are some of the more subtle nuances that people have questions about a lot, but that we've never really taken the time to sit down and dive into. So things like having those ghost notes, those little things where you're playing damp strings, but it gives it a more percussive quality, and it keeps the groove going. The rakes, which they come up. These are again the things that provide more nuance and more pulse and more subtlety to the arrangement, but that usually just sort of get glossed over, or I'm like, yeah, well, let's talk about that for a minute, but that's not the point because we're focused on the notes. This month's lessons give you a chance to kind of dive into some of those kind of details by the third live stream, and things like chord responses that come in the second half of the bar. Any place where the guitar is playing the melody first and then chord answers are directly analogous to where you might be singing and then having some space at the end of the line. And so any of these moves that help to fill in and provide more groove in the second half of each line are things that you can directly apply to a 12-bar blues that you might sing. Especially if it has that kind of short, only last, like those phrases that last for the first couple bars of each line, I use this example all the time, but come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, right? And so it could be the vocal, or it could be, it could be the chord answers. It could be, one of the bass lines might be enough. Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? And you've got this little groove machine set up where you've got these offbeats, and you've got this bass line that's climbing back up. That's a lot more motion than just sitting on, come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Right? You're not just sitting there with the steady bass going, which is fine and it's cool. I'm turning off my alarms on my phone, making sure that I have a clock going so I don't lose track of the time. But you can hear the difference between just having the steady bass and having, it's like having a band grooving behind you when you're not singing. And from there you can, start to elaborate even more. So the point of these lessons is to start with one skeletal tune that works as a tune over the steady bass, and then by repeating that tune 9 times, or almost 9 times, because sometimes we're just working on the vamp, but by taking that one simple tune as the template and then slowly adding new elements into that tune, you can see how on another tune where you maybe know a steady bass version of a song, you can start to use these same tools to address those other tunes as well. Chord hits, rakes, ghost notes, moving bass lines, all that stuff. So let's get rolling. We'll just walk through the main theme and the first 3 variations. And I'm happy to also take questions about stuff as we go. So the basic tune, I'll play through it one time. And then I'll break it down into the bass and the melody. Now, if you've been around here for any length of time, we usually take the tune and we break it down using something called the horizontal 3-step. If you're new, you can go back and look at any of the previous last year or more's worth of lessons. to see this in action. But the basic idea is the first step is to isolate the bass. The second step is to isolate the melody, and the third step is to put it all back together. And what this does is help you see how the thumb is the rhythm section for the whole tune. It tells you what the chord progression is, it tells you what the groove is, it tells you the form of the tune, how many bars and how long each line is and all of that. So the first thing to do is to go through and just look at what the bass is doing. And you can see that the bass is simply playing 4 quarter notes for every bar, just playing the root of the chord. Or in the case of the D7 over F sharp, that just means it's a D7 chord with an F sharp in the bass, the third of the chord. And you can get that voicing either by using middle finger, ring finger, and index finger, and pinky for the melody, or you can do the thumb in the bass. So the thumb is reaching over to grab the F sharp, and then middle finger and index finger and pinky are playing the melody like that. So to just go through and play the bass, you can follow along what's going on the 5th and 6th strings in the tab, and it sounds like this. We have 2, 3, 4, second bar, third bar, fourth bar, and now we're going to F sharp in the bass for the D chord, second bar of the second line, and then we're back to A for 2 bars. Now we're going to go to the turnaround. We're going to have E for 1 bar, and then F sharp, and then back to A, and we're just going to sit on A for 2 more bars. So that's the bass, and that is the foundation of the tune. And I'm doing some palm muting. I got this part of my hand resting right where the strings meet the bridge so that the bass has a little thump to it. I can pick a little harder. If I play wide open like this, it sounds a little less like a bass line and a little less like the foundation of the tune. It rings out a lot. So I recommend trying the palm muting approach as sort of the first technique to get things sounding a little more idiomatic and a little funkier. So now let's look at the melody. So you might practice that, just the bass to make sure you really have it dialed in. And then the melody, just look at everything that is not on the 5th and 6th strings, right? And you can see that we have a set of phrases. We have this short phrase, what I'd like to think of as a short resolution. It's a short phrase that lands on the root of the chord we're going into. And if you've been through earlier improvisation lessons, you're familiar with this idea of the short resolution. Here it is, the melody is made out of resolutions just like a solo is. So here's the opening melody, and that is answered by this longer resolution, a longer phrase that begins before its landing point, obviously, has to, and then lands at the beginning of bar 3 with the root again. So it's a little call and response. 2, 3, 4, 1. And these are stone cold classic kinds of blues phrases. And these kinds of phrases are often the basis for improvisation. Here they are the melody of the tune. And then we have some repetition. We have a very similar kind of phrase, but then we land, sorry, that's not a repetition. That's really a new phrase going into the D over F sharp. Right, so there's the new melody. And then here is the repetition, right? It's got the same answer because we're going back into an A chord. So once you've learned this phrase, you've learned this phrase as far as just the melody goes, right? And then here we have a new kind of phrase. Again, based on the sort of lingo we've used for improvisation in the past, this is a delayed resolution. It doesn't land right on the E chord. You have this sort of fooling around here. And we do do ultimately land on E, but it's not until the end of the third beat. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. But we do land on an E, and then look at, we repeat this phrase. So from a musical point of view, you know, if you're someone who's interested ultimately maybe like making up some instrumentals or tunes of your own, look at how this is very efficient, right? That we have 3 different kinds of phrases leading things off, right? We have this one into the A chord. We have this one leading into the D chord. And then we have this one leading into the E chord. But each one of them is answered the same way. So listen to it again and hear how that all works together. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but basically the melody, you want to, once you've worked out the bass on its own, step 1 of the horizontal 3-step, you want to work out the melody on its own, step 2 of the horizontal 3-step. And as a default, you can assign the index finger to the 3rd string, the middle finger to the 2nd string, and the ring finger to the high string. So if you find your thumb kind of getting into the melody here, just rest it on the 5th string so that you can't use it, and work out these figures until you can play the melody on its own. You know, and pay attention to where the pull-offs are, where the notes are held, and all that stuff. So just get to know the melody, because when you go to put the melody and the bass together, it really helps if you already know what is the bass doing, and then again, what is the melody doing. And this is why it's the horizontal 3-step. You're putting 2 horizontal things together. Music unfolds over time, and so the bass line is happening like this, and then the melody is happening like this. And now your job with these guys is to say, well, how do I make these 2 things happen at once, right? That's the whole game with fingerstyle guitar, right? So now you go in step 3 of this horizontal 3-step and you look at, well, where do things line up? Where am I playing a thumb and a finger note at the same time, which is called a pinch? And so you look at, well, here's one, and here's one, and nothing here because we're holding this note out. So the bass is playing on its own. Here's one. Again, this note is held out. So the parenthesis just means that the note's being held. So when you're looking at the tab, if you're not looking at the notation, you're looking at the tab, you see this note here, 2nd fret on the 3rd string, and you see that note again over here, but the fact that it's in parenthesis means you don't have to pick it again. It's just you're hearing it, but you're not picking it again. So you look for the places where you're pinching. Now, what this means is that if you're looking at something like these 2 bars, plus this pickup, here it's just the fingers, right? And now here you're playing together. And then for the next 3 beats, it's just the bass. And then in the next bar, you have 1, and here's a pinch, here's just a finger, here's just the bass, here's just the finger, here's a pinch, here's a pull off, and now we're back to the bass. And then you have all this space where it's just the bass. So you're never doing more than 2 things at once. You're never doing more than a pinch, really. Because if you're not doing a pinch, you're playing the bass or you're playing with a finger. But typically, we tend to learn by just looking, oh, here's the tab. And then you sort of go through and you grind out measure by measure. And you're doing all of this, but you're not really aware of this, right? You're sort of, we tend to, obsess over the challenge of like what grip comes next. But by isolating the bass and the melody, that can really help you to appreciate, well, I'm playing this bass line, I'm playing this this chord progression. And then while I'm playing this melody, so this is how the melody goes, and this is the call and response, and these are the licks, and this is the blues scale that I'm using. And when you can really appreciate both those things, putting them together is a little bit easier because you understand at least what the two musical things are that you're trying to combine to create a third musical thing. So that is a walkthrough of how to apply that process to this tune. Now I want to go back before we get into the variations and just there's a set of lessons from back in April on how to use this weekly practice planner to set up your practicing. And if you're new or you want a refresher on it, I recommend going back and checking that out. I'm not going to walk through the whole thing again right now, except to say that this is at the front of the PDF. But I do want to focus for a second on these technique exercises. The basic melody of this tune has this short resolution, right? And so these are some exercises to get you started with that when you go to do the first variation, because the first variation is to create a more nuanced bass line, right? Instead of just playing 4 beats of A, we're going to rock between the root and the 5th of the A chord. And we've had this before, most noticeably in an A blues from this time last summer called Muse-Lissippi Ibis. And if you're looking for something else to combine with this tune or some more chord and improvisation and arranging ideas to combine with Rosedale Shuffle, you could actually go and pillage the Muse-Lissippi Ibis arrangement and, get some ideas from there. But it has that kind of rocking bass line as well. So it's another good example of it. But here we're going to build that bass line up from scratch. Because Muse-Lissippi Ibis, I think someone on the forum said that it was the hardest tune we had done. So I was thinking maybe we need to go back and kind of build this up from scratch. So that's what this exercise is about. So we're going to have this kind of sound. And this is actually a really good question here from Regaling. Why every 2 beats? Why not every other beat? This is basically a feel that comes from swing. So you'll have the sound of, in between the 2-beat sound of New Orleans, like the earliest jazz stuff. Like that tuba thing, like, and the tuba's got 1 and 3, and the banjo's got 2 and 4, so it's right? That starts to get smoothed out in the swing era. It's not quite a walking bass yet, that comes later, but the first thing that happens is the swing bands, like Count Basie, they start to play this, it's 2 beats per note. So you have this, right? And that's that thing that's called the Kansas City 4/4. It's the thing that the Basie rhythm section played. And so you go from 2-beat to that 4/4 feel, and it really changes the way things feel and sound. This is an approximation of that because what it gives you is 2 beats on the root and 2 beats on the 5th. So it's a little bit simpler and a little more accessible, but it gives you some of that Kansas City 4/4 thing without having to go too far out of your way. And you can hear that the difference between if I just play a steady bass for the first 4 bars, it has that sort of moody delta thing that we all really like. But if we start to rock the bass, It's still a little stark. It doesn't really sound like swing yet, but it's got a little bit of that feel. And it opens it up because instead of hearing this for, all the way through, now you're hearing something different every couple of beats. And so now instead of feeling just like this literally monotonic bass for 4 bars, you're hearing this rocking alternation, which gives us a foundation to put a whole lot of other things into, which is what we're doing this month basically. But if that rocking bass, and I'm calling it a rocking bass because you're rocking between the root and the fifth, I don't want to say you're alternating because we think of alternating bass as this, right? So now you could, I'll leave it at that. So here is just, if this is a new idea to you, and if you've been doing steady bass or you've been doing alternating thumb or both, but you haven't done this rocking bass, which is a word I don't know if anybody else calls it that. I had to make up something to call it. And that seemed the most logical to me so that we have a little handle that we can carry this idea around with throughout the month. But here is what just the bass looks like if you isolate it, right? So it's just root and fifth. Now here are just 4 or 5 exercises to start building up what the fingers are going to do with the thumb. So if we have just the bass here and then we put in a note on beat 4, we get this. Right? So 1, 2, 3, pinch. So this would be the place to start putting your fingers together with the bass. Just playing a melody note on beat 4. Right? That's this exercise number 1. Then exercise number 2, put the melody on beats 4 and. So like this, we're going to pinch on 4 and then add in another 8th note afterwards on the and of 4. So we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And you can follow this around in a loop. Then, exercise 3, put in a note now on beat 3 and then continue to play 4 and, like this. Got to play the 3, right? 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, and. Now, syncopation. We're going to take this note on the downbeat. And the idea of syncopation is just the idea of moving a note that is on a downbeat either a half a beat earlier or a half a beat later, so it's less expected. So we're going to take this note on beat 3 and we're going to move it over to the end of 3. So we get 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you can hear that this is now basically the rhythm of, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? But if you just isolate the rhythm that you need, the coordination you need between thumb and fingers, this is a good warm-up for playing the tune. Because that's one of the most important rhythms in this particular tune. And it's the rhythm of a short resolution. Finally, in variation 2, I think it's 2, we're going to have this additional bass motion, right? Where instead of going from root to fifth and just playing root, root, fifth, fifth, every other time we're going to play the root, the fifth, and the flat 7. Now nothing's changing over here. It's still 5th string, 5th string, 6th string, 6th string. But on beat 4, we're going to play a G note here. This is the flat 7 of the A chord. And so this exercise 5 says, okay, let's practice that bass bass motion. And then over here, when we have this melody on top, we're not going to worry about the bass. It's a very much of a, it's a sleight of hand thing. It's a, you know, when there's nothing happening on top, you have more bandwidth to be more busy with the bass. When you are busy playing a melody on top, no one's going to notice that the bass is not as active, as long as you're still playing this sort of rocking bass thing. You don't have to worry about getting in this, you know, an extra bass note here on beat 4. So listen, man, this is what it sounds like, and you can tell that you won't really miss this bass motion over here because your ear is listening to something else, namely the melody. So we have this for exercise 5. There's the bass, here's the melody. Repeating. Another way to think about it is when the melody's going, just play the rocking bass line. When the melody's absent, do a little more with the bass to kind of fill things out. So that's a set of exercises that you can do for technique just to get warmed up and to get kind of in the groove. I'll pass over these for a moment. And now let's look at variation 1. This is putting the rocking bass into the melody. So nothing is different from the theme except the bass when we're on the 1 chord, not even on, you know, when we're on the 4 chord, when we're on the 5 chord, it's going to stay the same. Here's just F sharp for 4 beats, for 2 bars. When we're on E, the bass is just going to be on E. When we're on D over F sharp, we're just going to be on F sharp. It's only when we're on the A. So it measures 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, and 11 and 12. That's where we're going to play the rocking bass that goes from 1 to 5 and back. So that sounds like this. Okay, so you're just going to take what you've done for the main theme and start in with this rocking bass. And if you feel confident about the rocking bass, you could start with variation 1, because in one sense, if you start with the steady bass of the main theme, you do kind of have to unlearn that to learn variation 1. And we're going to base the rest of the variations off of the rocking bass. So you could theoretically start with variation 1. You could kind of think of this as this month's embellished version and the main theme as this month's fundamental. So if you're planning to get into any further variations, you might want to just jump in and do the rocking bass. But there's nothing wrong with starting with the theme with the steady bass and then moving into the rocking bass after that. So here is variation 2, and I've highlighted the only thing that changes between variation 1 and variation 2 is this little walk up from E to G. And you're just replacing this second E note in each of these measures with this walk up. And then there is a walk up on the D over F sharp and on the E, and I'll show you those in just a second. So what we have here for the first line, nothing's happening in the melody, so we can go and play a bass note. Here's just E's in the bass. Nothing's happening, so we can have the bass line here. And now we've got a melody, right? We're walking into the D7 chord. Now nothing's happening here on beats 3 and 4 in the melody, so we can go down to an E and walk chromatically up to the F sharp again. So in this case we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then here we're going to play an open E it's kind of like you can think of this a couple different ways. You can think we're kind of going quickly to the E chord to take us back to A, or you can think of this as being kind of just anticipating getting back into the A with its rocking between the root and the fifth. I think probably hearing this as like a kind of a quick 5 chord taking you back to the 1 is the most logical way to think about it. So now we have in measures 5 and 6, we have, and I'm letting go of the chord and everything. It's really just playing the bass. You won't miss the melody because the bass is active. And here we have nothing, so we play the bass. Here we have the melody, so it's just 2 beats of E. And now here on the E chord, we want to get some motion in the bass, so we go to E. I'm sorry, I did not mark this as such, but this is E over G sharp. It's just like D over F sharp, but it's moved up 2 frets. So we have, so same melody, and you don't even have to get this double stop here, including the 3rd string, but it's kind of cool if you can. You're going to bring up your index finger, put down your ring finger and your middle finger to make that chord. And then here we have the D again is going to be just like it was here. We're going to have the sound of a quick 5 chord. And then we're back to this. And there are slow and at-tempo versions of variations 1, 2, and 3 already posted. So you can go back and watch that happening in slow motion. But that's some of the logic behind what's going on there. And finally, variation 3, the boogie offbeats. And if you happen to check out the old 6 steps to playing fingerstyle blues in E that I posted a link to last week in the newsletter, I also talk about this idea of boogie offbeats, that the fingers, the picking fingers are a big part of what makes the groove. You can have a steady bass like this and not even know if you're playing swing 8ths or steady or straight 8th notes. Is it straight or is it swinging? Same bass. So in this case, we're playing with a swing 8ths feel. We're playing with it's basically a shuffle. But here we're going to have this new section here. And if you just look at what's going on here, we're playing on the and of 4, and then the bass comes in on 1, and then we pinch on 2, play on the and of 2, the bass goes down, we play on the and of 3, the bass comes up, we play on the and of 4. Well, I guess that's it, we're actually playing those notes. We're back into the anticipation. So what these X's mean is that you're not actually holding down the chord all the way to the fretboard. You're letting your fingers rest on the strings. The left hand, the fretting hand, is resting on the strings. And when you pick, you get this choked sound. That's what those X's refer to right here. So I did put in some X note heads, so good for me. If you're looking at the notation of the tab, the X's mean the same thing up there. And so one way to practice this is just to take beat 2 right here and play a pinch with the thumb index in the middle. You're making a little half bar to play the A chord. And so you're playing thumb index in the middle, root, fifth and root. And then you're relaxing your grip. You're just stopping, you're ceasing to press down with the fretting hand, but you're still picking it anyway. So you can try just keeping the chord held down and do that, pinch, and, where the and is just index in the middle. And then you can try relaxing your grip and playing it with just the relaxed grip. And that should sound like this. Right, so you're getting on top, and that's every other time you're pinching. So you get. So the trick is to press down on the pinch and relax on the and. So you get. And then to play the whole measure long pattern, you're going to come in on the and of 1, on the and of 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. All right, so this is being, so basically within one measure, you have the actual notes played on beat 2. So 1, 2, ghosted, bass note, ghosted, bass note, played, and held over. So you really have 2 chords you're actually playing on the and of 4 and on beat 2, and then you're playing ghost notes or choke notes, damp notes, whatever you want to call them, on the and of 2 and the and of 3. So we have I'll slow that down even more. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Like that. And luckily, right, this is on the A chord, so it's going to be the same in all 3 lines. So we're going to have this. Here's the bass. And here we come in. Here's the walk up in the bass. Quick 5. Anticipate on the end of 4. So that's the way to get from just playing the steady bass and just the melody to a whole sort of enhanced version of that melody. So I'll play just the theme, and then I'll play variation 3, which incorporates all of variations 1 and 2 and 3. So here it is with just the steady bass. Variation 3, which incorporates everything so far. So the important point is the melody doesn't change, but the accompaniment creates all this sort of rhythmic context for what you're doing. And so you can make the melody sound more compelling and persuasive if you have these other rhythmic, melodic, these other rhythmic and sort of, variations in the bass and the things that are happening when the melody is not active. So that's the idea. So just to sort of give a fast forward to what's coming next, there will not be a live stream next week, but the following week we will do chord responses and stop time and the extended one chord. And just so you have a heads up on what that's about, the chord responses happen in the second half of each line. We're going to use the 6th and 9th chord. So that's a different way to respond as opposed to with the bass line doing something or doing the boogie offbeats. And then stop time, you can do this over the first 4 bars. Wait, am I playing that right? Oh yeah. So from the top. So that's another way to change things up, and then you would continue with the chord hits at the end of these 2 lines, and then finally the extended 1 chord is the idea that you could play 8 bars of the 1 chord like this. So you get this sort of this extended 8-bar thing, but you also get a stop time in here. So it's sort of, again, it's sort of cumulative. So question, can you post the later variations now so we don't have to wait 2 weeks to work on them? I basically have. There are not going to be short videos for those. There will be another detailed walkthrough like this, but they're in the PDF, so you can definitely check them out. And if you want, I can play through these 3 examples I can play the whole thing right now. Just play through variation 4, variation 5, and variation 6 without stopping and talking, if that would help. So let me do that. And then the breakdowns of these and the details on how to do it will come in the remaining live streams. So here we go. Here's variation 4. So that's how variation 4 sounds. Here's variation 5. Let me just make sure I'm playing this exactly like I wrote it. Why don't... Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so here's variation 5. And finally, here's variation 6, the extended one chord. Make sure. Here it is. Okay, here we go. Here's variation 6. No, there we don't go. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, the answers here in variations 5 and 6 could be the boogie offbeats, right? Like you could have. Right, and those aren't the only chord hits you could have, right? I mean, you could have, you know. Right, I mean, it could be anything that fits in those two bars. And so that's why it's pretty flexible. And it's just the idea of a chord hit, where the chord hit goes that matters. What the actual chord hits are, these are there so you can practice them, but you can obviously swap them in for something different as soon as you're familiar with the concept. Okay, question from, is there a BPM? You know, there isn't. It's great to practice with a metronome, but I feel like just find your lowest common denominator. Find the place where you can get these things to fall into place at a solid, consistent tempo, and then slowly raise it up. There is no specific tempo that you are expected to play this at. Okay, Valerie. Hey, Valerie. Can you explain what stop time means again? Oh, yeah, sure. I will get into, because stop time is part of the second set of variations, I will be going over that more in the second live stream. But it's the idea that the thumb, again, the thumb is the rhythm section, the thumb is the band. So in an ensemble arrangement, the band would play hits. Everybody would play together, like usually on the downbeat, and then someone improvises in and around that, right? So. And there's usually this sort of acceleration towards the end of the stop time. So there could be like little bass figures, right? And then then the bass gets busier as it sort of drags you back in. So Come On, Let the Good Times Roll is kind of the classic. You know, I just was listening to that the other day, the Dr. John version, but I think there's a Stevie Ray Vaughan version too. But, you know, it's like that. Come on, baby. Right, then you're back in. So stop time, just literally think of it as the time stops, right? Like there's just a set of hits. And for most people, they're not playing, right? But the soloist or the singer or the improviser and the band is going to make those hits, and the other stuff is going to happen in between. It's really another kind of call and response, right? Like there's the call and here's the response. Right. So supposedly Louis Armstrong invented stop time, and I had a music professor in college who said that the whole idea of the stop time is that Louis Armstrong is going to jump over a ravine, basically. It's like it raises the stakes to have this stop time because you're not playing against the band, right? You have to like maintain the groove and all that other stuff. Oh, is Louis Jordan the first? Did he write Let the Good Times Roll? We'll leave it to Johnny to know the facts. Thanks, Johnny. That's good to know. I totally spaced on that, or maybe never knew it. But so my professor said, well, you know, Louis Armstrong, you know, he's basically raising the stakes on himself. He's like, watch me do this. And what he said is, you know, Louis Armstrong is not just going to jump across the ravine. He's going to put on a show as he's jumping, basically. So the stop time is just to raise the stakes and make things more exciting. And also to create tension, because where's the band? It's stopped. And then the band, your thumb, when that comes back in, then the groove is resumed and everything's cool. Yes, as Valerie says, the crowd then, in fact, goes wild. Okay, question from Bruce. Unrelated question, if you have time. Was the YouTube video posted on your channel today essentially an introduction of what I hear people call the Barry Harris method? Did I post something today? I don't think I posted something today, unless I am. Just tell me the name of the video, and I'll and I can tell you if that's if that is the Barry Harris thing or not. I did do one lesson way back on basically on playing in A minor and alternating between A minor and E7 flat 9 chords, which are basically diminished chords. A minor 6 chords, sorry. And if so, that is in fact one very basic aspect of what Barry Harris talks about, which is about all I was able to digest. But there's tons of videos of him talking about that stuff. And yeah, that is, if that's the video I'm thinking of, if you're and I are thinking of the same video, then yeah, that's kind of the Barry Harris thing in a very basic way. Posted on the Acoustic Guitar Magazine channel. I have completely lost track of which one of those videos is coming out when. But yeah, that is sort of the Barry Harris idea, which is that there are 4 A minor 6 chords. So with the 5th on top, with the root on top, with the 6th on top, sorry. So 5th on top, 6th on top, root on top, 3rd on top, and then you're back. There's the 5th on top again. And then in between, you have 4 diminished chords, all of which are in versions of E7 flat 9. And that you can then alternate and so then you get this scale with a half step between the 6th and the 5th, which is where a lot of those Barry Harris bebop licks, or just bebop licks in general, come from. playing A minor blues. But you can interpolate the sound of basically quick resolutions from 5 back to 1 and so on. So you're just basically playing A minor, but then occasionally dropping in E7 flat 9 stuff, which is basically diminished stuff. Which is why people sound like they can just play forever on one chord, because they're really thinking of it as more than one chord. So that is far afield from what we're here to talk about, but it's a good question. Okay, so that is the story for today. So try out the theme, try out those 3 variations. Feel free to look ahead into the remaining variations. We will not have a live stream next week because I won't be in my studio with access to all this fabulous production. But we'll follow up the next 2 weeks with 2 more live streams. But in the meantime, you can certainly go ahead and check out variations 4, 5, and 6. You can also go back and look at the other 12-bar blues in A we have is Muse, Lissippi, Ibis. I think that's from July 2021. There is also a 9-bar blues Sitting on Top of the World that you can also apply some of this stuff to, although since it's not in the 12-bar format, it doesn't have quite the same sort of call and response structure. It's got a call and response structure, but it's not the same as this one. So those are some other things you can go and look at if you are needing other stuff to chew on. And of course, if you have questions, post them in the forum, and I will do my best to keep an eye on that between now and the next stream. So, all right, I'll play a little more of the tune, and if you got any last minute questions, drop them in. Otherwise, I will see you in a couple of weeks live, and in the meantime, on the forum. All right. See you all